The stars hung silently against the void as analyst Minho stared at his monitor for the fifth consecutive hour. The Galactic Confederate outpost on Rim Station 7 wasn't known for excitement, but something in the readings had caught his attention. Energy signatures, faint but distinctive, rippled across the sensors at the edge of known space. Still obsessing over ghost signals? Analyst Dury dropped a steaming cup beside him. Director Tay wants the quarterly reports. Maybe focus on something real for a change. Minho nodded absently, eyes never leaving the screen. These patterns match something I've seen before? Your precious human myths again? Dury rolled her eyes. Next you'll tell me the ancient space dragons are real too. The humans were nothing but a historical footnote, supposedly an intelligent species that had fled their dying world thousands of years ago in massive colony ships. Most Confederate scholars considered them a cautionary tale about environmental stewardship, if they considered them at all. But Minho had spent years studying the old texts. Something about the humans fascinated him, their adaptability, their strange thinking, the way they supposedly approached problems sideways instead of head-on like rational species. Look at this frequency modulation, Minho pointed. The ancient records describe human ships communicating exactly this way. Coincidence, Dury said, but leaned closer. Those signals are probably just cosmic background radiation. 2 days. Later, the signals strengthened. A week after that, they became impossible to ignore. Director Tay called an emergency meeting of all senior staff. We have confirmed multiple objects decelerating toward Confederate space, Tay announced, his usual confidence noticeably diminished. Current mass estimates suggest these are substantially larger than any known ships. The room erupted in worried murmurs. Minho raised his hand tentatively. What is it, analyst? Tay asked, clearly irritated at the interruption. Sir, I believe these might be human vessels. The room fell silent, then burst into laughter. The mythical humans? Senior analyst June snorted. Why not suggest it's the cosmic turtle carrying the universe on its back? Director Tay silenced the room with a gesture. Analyst Minho, while I appreciate creative thinking, this is hardly the time for children's stories. With respect, sir, Minho pushed forward, heart pounding. I've been studying the ancient records for years. The communication patterns, propulsion signatures, and approach vectors all match historical accounts of human technology. It's not just one coincidence, but dozens. Preposterous, Tay dismissed. The humans, if they ever existed, would have died out millennia ago. The meeting continued, with plans to send scout ships and alert the Confederate Defense Fleet. Minho returned to his station, frustrated but undeterred. He compiled his research, cross-referencing the incoming signals with historical records. 3 days later, the objects were close enough to resolve on long-range scanners. Not just ships, but a fleet. Massive vessels of unfamiliar design stretching beyond visual range. The Confederate Council, finally taking the situation seriously, ordered their entire border fleet to assemble. Minho found himself unexpectedly summoned to Central Command. The room fell silent as he entered. Director Tai looked like he hadn't slept in days. Analyst Minho, Council Representative Hana said, explain your human theory again. Minho swallowed hard. The ancient texts speak of humans as uniquely adaptable. While most species evolve to fit their environment, humans change their environment to suit themselves. When their world began dying, they didn't wait for governmental consensus like we would. They built generation ships and scattered in all directions. And you believe this approaching fleet consists of these humans? Another counselor asked. Yes, Minho said firmly. The records suggest they think differently than us, unpredictably, creatively. If they've survived all this time. The implications hung in the air. A species that thought differently might have developed differently, might have taken technological paths the Confederacy never considered. We've been attempting standard contact protocols, Director Tay admitted. No response. As if triggered by his words, every screen in the command center flickered. A message appeared in perfect Confederate standard. Greetings from the Human Alliance. We come in peace and request diplomatic contact. Our fleet will maintain position at your border as a courtesy. The room erupted in chaos. Council representative. Hannah stared at the message, her face pale. How do they know our language? Someone whispered. A second message appeared. We have been observing your civilization with interest. Your cultural and scientific achievements are impressive. We look forward to formal introductions. Director Tay collapsed into his chair. They've been watching us? For how long? The next message chilled the room. We have established settlements in 12,142 star systems beyond your explored space. Our diplomatic fleet awaits your response. Minho felt a strange mix of vindication and terror. The humans weren't refugees fleeing extinction. They were explorers who had been building an empire while the Confederacy thought itself alone in the HFY universe. As the Council frantically debated their response, Minho stared at the screens showing the massive human ships. The myths had become reality, and nothing in the Confederate worlds would ever be the same again. The Confederate fleet assembled at the border was an impressive sight. Over 300 warships arranged in defensive formation, their sleek hulls gleaming against the backdrop of space. It represented the pinnacle of 17 species technological achievement, the most powerful armada ever assembled in known space. Until now. Through the viewports of the Confederate flagship, the AudioBook, human vessels dwarfed everything in sight. Their ships defied conventional design, with flowing organic lines and sections that seemed to shift and move in ways that hurt the eyes. Where Confederate ships were uniformly functional, these human vessels appeared almost artistic, yet radiated power that sensors couldn't properly quantify. They're not even in battle formation, muttered Commander Jin as he studied the tactical display. They're just waiting. Director Tay paced the command deck, fighting to maintain his composure. The fleet admiral had given him authority to handle first contact, a responsibility he now desperately wished to avoid. Open the channel again, he ordered. The main screen flickered to life, revealing a human for the first time. The being looked eerily similar to several Confederate species, yet distinctly different, less specialized somehow. The human had dark hair pulled back from a face that seemed remarkably expressive. Greetings, Director Tay, the human said in perfect Confederate standard, without any translation device visible. I am Diplomat Junho of the Human Alliance. We appreciate your fleet's welcome, though the weapons lock is unnecessary. Tay stiffened. Their targeting systems weren't broadcasting any emissions that should be detectable. How did you learn our language? He asked, ignoring the comment about weapons. Junho smiled, a gesture that looked both familiar and alien. We've been studying your broadcasts for quite some time. Your entertainment programs are particularly helpful for understanding cultural contexts. From the corner of his eye, Tay noticed analyst Minho being escorted onto the command deck. The young analyst's eyes widened as he saw the human on screen. We request a face-to-face diplomatic meeting, Junho continued. Perhaps aboard your flagship. We're prepared to match atmospheric conditions to your standards. You would come here? Tay couldn't hide his surprise. In Confederate protocol, the less powerful party always traveled to the stronger one's territory. Of course, we come as friends and equals, Junho replied. Though if you prefer, we could host you aboard our vessel. The diplomatic quarters can accommodate any environmental needs. Admiral Sunwoo stepped forward. Director, I advise against allowing unknown entities aboard our flagship. Junho tilted his head. Understandable concerns, Admiral. Perhaps neutral territory would be preferable. We detected an uninhabited world in the system with suitable conditions. Before Tay could respond, Analyst Minho stepped forward. If I may, sir, according to the ancient texts, humans valued direct interaction. This offer follows their historical patterns. Tay frowned at the interruption, but nodded slowly. Prepare a shuttle and security team. We will meet on the planet's surface. 6 hours later, Tay found himself standing on alien soil, accompanied by Admiral Sunwoo, a security detail, and, against his better judgment, Analyst Minho, whose knowledge of human myths suddenly seemed valuable. The human shuttle descended, silently, much smaller than their massive ships but still elegant in design. Its landing created barely a disturbance in the air, suggesting propulsion technology beyond Confederate understanding. 3 humans emerged. Diplomat Junho led the way, flanked by 2 others, one wearing what appeared to be a military uniform, the other in more elaborate clothing. Director Tae. Junho bowed slightly. May I present Admiral Jiwoo of our exploratory fleet and council, Representative Yoonji. Tae performed the traditional Confederate greeting. Welcome to... He realized he didn't know what to call this world. We've been calling it Meeting Place. Junho smiled. Not very creative, but accurate. Admiral Jiwoo stepped forward. She moved with the confident grace of someone comfortable with her body's capabilities. Your fleet formation was impressive, Admiral Sunwoo. 7th-level branching defense, if I'm not mistaken. An excellent choice, against unknown capabilities. Sunwoo's expression betrayed his shock that she had recognized their classified tactical positioning. Council Representative Yoonji addressed the elephant in the room. You're wondering about our presence beyond your borders and why we've chosen now to make contact. The thought had crossed our minds, Tae admitted. We left Earth, our homeworld, approximately 12,000 of your standard years ago, Yoonji explained. Our early ships were slow. We spread outward in all directions, establishing colonies where we could. As our technology improved, we explored further. You've been watching us? Admiral Sunwoo asked sharply. Observing, Junho corrected gently. We discovered your civilization about 3 centuries ago. We've been learning about you ever since. Minyo couldn't contain himself. The texts were right. Humans come not as conquerors but as witnesses. That's what the ancient warning said. Junho turned to him with genuine interest. You've studied our history? I'd very much like to see these texts of yours. Admiral Jiwoo's expression grew more serious. We've established settlements in thousands of systems beyond your explored space. Our territory dwarfs the Confederacy, though we haven't pursued the same centralized government model you use. The implications hit Tae like a physical blow. The Confederacy had always assumed they were the pinnacle of galactic civilization. Now they were learning they were merely a small pocket of order in a much larger universe, one where humans had quietly built an empire while remaining undetected. Why reveal yourselves now? He managed to ask. Because it's time, Yoonji said simply. Your civilization is approaching technological breakthroughs that will inevitably lead you to discover us. We preferred to introduce ourselves rather than be stumbled upon. As the diplomatic talks continued into the alien night, Tae watched the humans carefully. They spoke openly about their history, their governance, their discoveries. Yet he sensed depths beneath their friendly demeanor. These weren't the primitive refugees of myth, but sophisticated beings who had mastered technologies the Confederacy had yet to imagine. The myth had become reality. And the reality was far more complex than anyone had anticipated. Admiral Jiwoo stood alone in her private quarters aboard the flagship Horizon, gazing out at the stars. Behind her, the holographic display showed the Confederate fleet, impressive by their standards but quaint to human eyes. She remembered her grandfather's stories about humanity's first stumbling steps into the void, how their early ships had been little more than metal cans propelled by controlled explosions. 12,000 years, she whispered to herself. And look how far we've come. The door chimed softly. Enter, she called, turning from the viewport. Captain Hyun stepped inside, datapad in hand. The diplomatic team has returned from the surface, Admiral. Junyo reports the initial meeting went well, considering. Considering they're terrified of us? Jiwoo smiled faintly. That would be his assessment, yes. Hyun handed her the datapad. They're struggling to process our existence. Their historical records painted us as refugees fleeing a dying Earth. Finding out we've built something larger than their entire civilization is challenging for them. Jiwoo scrolled through Junho's detailed notes. Understandable. Imagine believing yourself the pinnacle of galactic development, only to discover you're just one small region in a much larger community. She set down the datapad and returned to the viewport. The Horizon was just one of 50 vessels in this diplomatic fleet, itself merely an exploratory branch of the vast human alliance that spanned multiple galaxies. For centuries, humanity had expanded outward, establishing colonies, building infrastructure, developing technologies that worked with the universe rather than against it. When they'd first detected the Confederate signals 300 years ago, the Alliance Council had debated making immediate contact, but their ancestors' caution, born from millennia of hard lessons, had prevailed. They would watch and learn before revealing themselves. That young analyst, Minho, Jiwoo said. Junho thinks he could be valuable. He's studied what limited knowledge they have of humans. A mythology enthusiast? Hyun raised an eyebrow. Sometimes myths contain seeds of truth. Jiwoo turned back to face her captain. Arrange a private meeting. I'd like to speak with him directly. The next day, aboard a small transport vessel hovering in neutral space, Jiwoo watched the Confederate shuttle approach. It docked with mechanical precision, and minutes later, a nervous-looking Minho was escorted into the conference room. Welcome aboard, Analyst Minho. Jiwoo greeted him warmly. She'd specifically chosen this smaller vessel rather than the imposing Horizon for their meeting. Please sit. Minho's eyes darted around, taking in details of human technology with poorly concealed fascination. Thank you for inviting me, Admiral. Junho speaks highly of your knowledge regarding human history, Jiwoo said, pouring a drink from a carafe. I'm curious what your texts say about us. Minho accepted the offered cup with slight hesitation. Most of what we have are fragmented records. Warnings, really. They speak of humans as different thinkers, problem solvers who approached challenges from unexpected angles. That's fairly accurate. Jiwoo smiled. It's been one of our strengths. The texts say humans left their world when it began dying. Minho continued. They describe your ships as arcs carrying the seeds of Earth across the void, but they suggested you were refugees, not whatever you've become. Jiwoo nodded thoughtfully. Earth was indeed dying when we left, damaged by centuries of exploitation. Some stayed behind to heal the planet. Others set out to find new homes among the stars. She activated a holographic display showing Earth as it now was, a vibrant blue-green jewel orbiting a yellow star. This is our homeworld today, restored over millennia. We never abandoned it completely. You've been watching us for 300 years, Minho said, a statement rather than a question. Why? Caution, primarily, Jiwoo answered honestly. Humanity's earlier history was marked by conflict. We nearly destroyed ourselves several times before learning better ways. When we discovered your confederacy, we wanted to understand you before making contact. And what did you learn? Minho asked. That you're not so different from what we once were, Jiwoo said. 17 species working together, building something greater than any could achieve alone. It's admirable, but you're still bound by hierarchical thinking, still viewing the universe as something to be conquered rather than partnered with. She leaned forward. Your people believe we came seeking alliance because we respect your power. The truth is, we could have conquered the Confederate world centuries ago if that had been our intention. Minho paled slightly. Then why make contact at all? Why not just continue observing? Because isolation leads to stagnation, Jiwoo said simply. Every perspective offers something new. Your 17 species have developed technologies and cultural paradigms we find fascinating. We believe exchange benefits everyone. She stood and walked to the viewport, gesturing for Minho to join her. Outside, the stars shimmered against the darkness. 12,000 years ago, we looked up at stars like these and wondered if we were alone, she said softly. We sent out our arcs not just to survive, but to discover. Each new world, each new species, each new idea expands what it means to be human. And what does it mean? Minho asked. To be human? Jiwoo smiled. To never stop questioning, to adapt without losing our essence, to face the unknown with curiosity rather than fear. She turned to face him directly. Your people fear us now, that's natural. but fear can transform into wonder given time. As their conversation continued, Jiwoo shared stories of human history, their struggles and triumphs, their mistakes, and growth. She described planets with oceans of liquid methane where human colonies floated on artificial islands, and gas giants where communities lived in platforms suspended in the clouds. She spoke of the Alliance governance, where each world determined its own affairs while contributing to the greater whole. How humanity had encountered other intelligent species during their expansion, incorporating new perspectives rather than imposing their own. When it was time for Minho to return, he paused at the airlock. The Confederate Council is divided on how to proceed. Some want to establish strong alliances, others fear subjugation. Change is never easy, Jiwoo acknowledged. But remember this, we could have remained hidden. We chose to step forward and offer our hand in friendship. That choice reveals more about our intentions than any words could convey. As she watched the Confederate shuttle depart, Jiwoo wondered how this first contact would ultimately unfold. Humanity had come far from its chaotic beginnings, learning patience across millennia of expansion. They could afford to move slowly, to let the Confederacy adjust to this new reality at its own pace. After all, the stars would still be there tomorrow. The joint archaeological team worked in respectful silence, humans and Confederates side by side in the dim light of the ancient chamber. 3 weeks had passed since first contact, and while diplomatic talks continued on multiple fronts, this scientific expedition had been approved as a gesture of goodwill. Professor Junho, not to be confused with Diplomat Junho, carefully brushed dust from a section of wall covered in unfamiliar symbols. Despite being one of humanity's foremost experts in xenoarchaeology, these markings left him puzzled. Fascinating, murmured Dr. Yuna, the Confederate lead scientist. Her species, the Lanari, resembled tall, slender humanoids with iridescent skin that shifted colors with their emotions. Currently, she glowed a soft blue of intellectual curiosity. These appear similar to markings we found on Delos Prime, and identical to symbols from the moon ruins back in our home system, Junho agreed. The ruins they were exploring lay on a dead world at the edge of Confederate space, a planet neither civilization had claimed. When human scientists had suggested a joint expedition, the Confederate Council had agreed, perhaps hoping to gain insight into human technological advantages. What neither side had expected was to find evidence of a shared heritage. "Pass me the spectral analyzer," Junho said, holding out his hand without looking up. The device was placed in his palm, and he nodded thanks to his assistant, Day. The analyzer hummed softly as it processed the chemical composition of the wall markings. Carbon-based pigment, Junho noted. At least 30,000 years old, but the degradation pattern is consistent with controlled atmospheric conditions. Someone maintained this chamber for a very long time after it was created. Yuna's skin rippled with purple surprise. That matches our findings from other sites. But who would preserve these places for millennia, then simply abandon them? Before Junho could respond, a shout echoed from a nearby tunnel. "Professor, Doctor, you need to see this." Both leaders hurried through the narrow passage, emerging into a larger chamber that the team had only just unsealed. Young Minho, the Confederate analyst whose fascination with human myths had led to his reassignment to the expedition, stood, transfixed before a massive mural that covered an entire wall. "By the Eternal," Yuna whispered, her skin flashing bright yellow with shock. The mural depicted a star chart, hundreds of systems connected by lines of different colors. But what drew their attention were the figures represented at various points on the map. Some were clearly recognizable as Confederate species: the tall Lanari, the four-armed Bolis, the crystalline Nurani. And there, placed at a small yellow star at the edge of the chart, was an unmistakable human figure. "They knew about all of us," Minho said, his voice hushed with awe. "Whoever built this place knew about humans and Confederate species alike." Junho stepped closer, examining the intricate details. "Not just knew about us, look at the symbolism. The same colors, the same patterns connect all these different figures. I think they're showing lineage. Dr. Yuna moved to a console, near the wall, her fingers working quickly across its ancient surface. To everyone's surprise, it hummed to life, projecting a holographic display into the center of the chamber. A voice spoke in a language none of them recognized, yet somehow all understood, not through words, but through concepts forming directly in their minds. The Cedars greet you, children of distant worlds. If you are receiving this message, then at least two branches of our legacy have rediscovered each other. The hologram shifted, showing beings of light and energy, only vaguely humanoid. We traveled the cosmos when the universe was young, seeking worlds where life might flourish. On each promising planet, we left pieces of ourselves, genetic patterns, basic building blocks that would evolve according to each world's unique conditions. Minho stepped forward, transfixed. The ancient ones, he whispered. The legends were true. The hologram continued, showing different worlds developing over eons. We did not dictate the path evolution would take. Each seeded world followed its own journey. Some would develop intelligence quickly, others more slowly. Some would produce singular dominant species, others a diversity of intelligent life forms. Images of various species appeared, including perfect representations of both humans and the Confederate races. You were all our children, given the freedom to grow in your own way. Earth's unique challenges produced humans, adaptable problem solvers whose evolution valued versatility over specialization. Other worlds favored different traits, creating the beautiful diversity we hope to foster. Professor Junho found himself unconsciously reaching for Dr. Yuna's hand. The Lenari scientist didn't pull away, her skin now pulsing with gentle gold wonder. We established these repositories throughout the galaxy, places where our children might one day learn their shared heritage. We hope this knowledge brings understanding rather than conflict. You are different branches of the same ancient tree, unique expressions of the same cosmic legacy. The hologram faded, leaving the chamber in silence. This changes everything, Dr. Yuna finally said, her voice barely audible. For thousands of years, the Confederate species had believed themselves the pinnacle of evolution, naturally superior to other life forms. This revelation, that they had been deliberately seeded just as humans had been, challenged the very foundation of their understanding. No wonder your physiology seemed eerily familiar, Junho said thoughtfully. We're distant cousins, shaped by different environments but stemming from the same source code. Minho was frantically taking notes, his hands shaking with excitement. The ancient texts mentioned star brothers and cosmic kinship, but they were considered poetic metaphors, not literal descriptions. Over the next several hours, the team documented everything in the chamber, transmitting their findings to both human and Confederate authorities. The implications were staggering, not just scientifically but philosophically and politically. As they worked, Junho noticed Dr. Yuna growing quieter, her skin fading to a contemplative gray. "Are you all right?" he asked gently. "My entire life," she said slowly. "I was taught that Lenari evolution represented the ideal path, that our adaptations were superior by natural law. Many Confederate species hold similar beliefs. But this," she gestured at the mural, "this suggests we're all just different answers to the same question." "Different but equally valid," Junho offered. "That's how evolution actually works, not a ladder toward perfection, but a branching tree of possibilities." "Your human perspective makes more sense now," Yuna admitted. "Your species evolved to be generalists in a challenging environment. No wonder you approach problems differently than we do." As the team prepared to return to their ships with their revolutionary findings, Minho approached Professor Junho. "What do you think this means for the future, for humans and Confederates?" Junho looked back at the ancient chamber one last time. "I think it means we have more in common than either of us realized, and perhaps that's exactly what both our civilizations needed to discover." The stars overhead seemed to shine more brightly as they emerged from the ruins. No longer strangers from different corners of the galaxy, but long-separated family finally beginning to recognize one another. The grand assembly hall of the newly constructed Stellar Nexus station hummed with voices speaking dozens of languages. Floating in neutral space at the border between Confederate territory and human-explored regions, the station represented the first joint project between the two civilizations, a physical embodiment of their budding relationship. Admiral Ji Woo stood by the curved viewport watching shuttles arrive from across both territories. 6 months had passed since the fleet's appearance and the subsequent archaeological discoveries. 6 months of careful diplomacy, cultural exchange, technological demonstrations, and occasionally heated debates. Nervous, diplomat Junho appeared, at her side, immaculate in formal alliance attire. Cautiously optimistic, Jiwoo replied with a slight smile. The path forward isn't clear yet, but at least we're walking it together. The revelation of shared origins had sent shockwaves through both civilizations. For humans, it had been merely fascinating, one more discovery in their long history of adaptation. For the Confederacy, it had triggered nothing short of a philosophical crisis. Species that had built their entire identities around evolutionary superiority suddenly faced evidence that they were simply different branches from the same ancient tree. Some embraced this new understanding eagerly, others resisted, clinging to old hierarchies and beliefs. The Valari delegation is still threatening to withdraw from the proceedings, Junho noted, referring to one of the most traditional Confederate species. Their religious authorities are struggling to incorporate the Cedar revelations into their doctrines. They'll come around, Jiwoo said. Change takes time, especially when it challenges fundamental beliefs. She spotted Minho across the hall, deep in conversation with a group of human scientists. The young analyst had become something of a celebrity in both territories, the person who had first recognized humanity's return. Now he served as a cultural liaison, helping bridge the vast gaps in understanding. It's time, Junho said as chimes echoed through the hall. Ready to make history? Jiwoo straightened her uniform. Again? We seem to be doing that a lot lately. The ceremony was being broadcast across both civilizations. The formal establishment of the Galactic Concord, a framework for cooperation between the human alliance and the Confederate worlds. Not quite a political union, but far more than a simple treaty. Confederate High Counselor Tay opened the proceedings, his voice steady, despite the magnitude of the moment. For millennia, the Confederacy believed itself alone among the stars. He began. We built our society, our philosophies, our very understanding of life on that assumption. When the human fleet appeared at our borders, many feared conquest or subjugation. He paused, looking directly at the assembled delegates. Instead, we found long-lost kin. Different, yes, shaped by unique evolutionary pressures and historical experiences, but connected to us by ancient bonds we had forgotten. A murmur passed through the crowd. The Confederate species had been forced to confront not only humanity's unexpected power, but also their own previously unquestioned assumptions about their place in the cosmos. Alliance Representative Yunji stepped forward next. 12,000 years ago, humanity left Earth seeking new beginnings among the stars. We built colonies, explored the unknown, and eventually established the Alliance, not as an empire imposing unity, but as a framework allowing diversity to flourish. She smiled warmly. We've learned that strength comes not from uniformity, but from the blending of different perspectives. The Confederacy has much to teach us, just as we have knowledge to share. As the formal proclamations continued, Jiwoo watched the assembled delegates. Some still showed signs of discomfort or skepticism. Change never came easily, especially at this scale. The Nurani ambassador, a crystalline being who communicated through light patterns, pulsed with questions during the trade agreement section. How can we integrate economies that developed entirely separately? The Confederate standard has been stable for 2,000 cycles. Carefully and gradually, replied the human economic advisor. We're not suggesting merging our systems overnight, but creating bridges between them. Think of it as learning a new language. We start with basic phrases before attempting poetry. Later, During discussions about scientific cooperation, the Volari representative finally spoke up. Your technological approach violates fundamental tenets of our understanding. We work with natural laws. Your methods seem to bend them. Professor Junho smiled patiently. Different starting assumptions led us down different research paths. Where Confederate science sought to understand and work within existing frameworks, human ingenuity often focused on finding exceptions and loopholes. Both approaches have value. As the day progressed, Jiwoo noticed something remarkable happening. The initial stiffness between delegates began to soften. Conversations grew more animated, more genuinely curious. In corners of the assembly hall, humans and various Confederate species clustered together, comparing notes and sharing stories. Near the refreshment area, she overheard a human engineer explaining faster-than-light principles to fascinated Confederate scientists. We don't actually break physics, we just realize the universe has more dimensions than we first thought. It's like taking a shortcut through your neighbor's yard instead of walking around the block. Elsewhere, a Lenari cultural preservationist was demonstrating traditional color-shifting patterns to a rapt human audience. Each sequence tells a story from our ancestral migrations. See how this ripple represents the great crossing of the Azure Gulf? By evening, as the formal proceedings gave way to a celebratory reception, Jiwoo found herself standing beside Director Tae, both watching the mingling delegates. When I was a child, Tae said quietly, I dreamed of exploring beyond our known space. My teachers told me there was nothing out there worth finding. He shook his head ruefully. I wonder what else they were wrong about. That's the beauty of exploration, Jiwoo replied. Every discovery raises new questions. Across the room, Minho was being formally appointed as the first Confederate ambassador to Earth. The young analyst who had believed in myths when others scoffed now stood as a bridge between civilizations. I accept this honor with humility, he was saying, and with the hope that I am merely the first of many who will build understanding between our peoples. As the celebration continued, Jiwoo slipped away to the command center. Reports were coming in from across both territories, reactions to the broadcast, questions about the future, concerns and hopes in equal measure. Admiral, Captain Hyun, called her over. The Joint Exploration Fleet is ready for your inspection. 20 ships, 10 of ours, 10 Confederate. On the display, she could see the newly commissioned vessels waiting at the edge of the station's defensive perimeter. They represented something unprecedented, a combined fleet tasked with exploring the unknown regions beyond both human and Confederate space. What course shall I relay to the fleet commander? Hyun asked. Jiwoo studied the star map, focusing on the vast unexplored regions beyond known territory. The archaeological discoveries had hinted at more cedar sites waiting to be found, more pieces of their shared heritage scattered among the stars. Tell them to set course for the Veiled Nebula, she decided. The ancient star chart suggested something significant in that region. As she returned to the reception, Jiwoo paused at the viewport once more. Beyond the gleaming hulls of the docked ships, stars stretched infinitely in all directions, each one a possibility, a potential discovery, a new chapter in their shared story. The human fleet's appearance had forever changed the course of galactic history. What had begun with fear and uncertainty now bloomed into something far more promising. A future where different branches of the same ancient family walked among the stars together, stronger for their differences, unified by their common origin. Minho joined her at the viewport, following her gaze to the newly commissioned exploration fleet. They say the Cedars left hundreds of repositories across the galaxy, he said. Imagine what we might find out there, working together. That's why we came back, Jiwoo smiled. Not to conquer, but to connect. To learn what we might become when we combine our strengths. As if in answer, the exploration fleet's engines flared to life, illuminating the darkness as they prepared to venture into the unknown. Not as humans or Confederates, but as explorers united by curiosity and the endless promise of the stars.